But I know, we've got some values at Regal, and one of them is generosity. We want to be generous as a company. I want to be generous as a person. And when I'm no longer here, I would like generosity to be one of the things that would have defined me.
All right. Well, today, welcome to Orlando Impact. This is our podcast. It's one of my favorite things to do on a weekly basis, and I'm interviewing some amazing folks in Central Florida, folks that I've had the opportunity to be around, work with, or just got to know. And I've met Tim Kuck at a beautiful place in Marsh Harbor. I think, Tim, it was about 6 years ago. I just remember a big smile and a beautiful boat, and we were off to a very cool, unique retreat. But I specifically remember, Tim, how hospitable you were, how beautiful the boat was. And I remember you knowing the maps about where to go get lobster in the Bahamas that made you a very, very wealthy man. And I also remember just being on a rope, being pulled by the boat with a pair of goggles on, looking down to figure out where them lobsters were. Those were very memorable moments the first time we met. But Tim, you and your family are a very impactful family in Central Florida. You have a very large business in the form of Regal Boats. And Tim, I know that you are second generation. So tell us a little bit about your story, Tim, just growing up with Dad, tinkering and building boats, and how the business kind of have grown and what it was like in the early days of entering into the business as a young man.
Well, you mentioned Marsh Harbor, which is in the Abacos, Bahamas, which is still recovering from Hurricane Dorian last year. And when I was 15 years old, my mom and dad, they traded a boat for the use of a house on Man o' War. And so at 15 years old, was introduced to the Bahamas and have really adored visiting the Bahamas ever since, and has shaped, I would say, my life and even the life of my kids in regards to recreation and boating. What a phenomenal opportunity. And about at that time, and actually 1973, the oil embargo happened, and our business, which my mom and dad started from scratch, knew nothing about boats, picked the name out of encyclopedia in 1969. But in 1973, we just started to get on plane, I would say, get the boat up on plane, the business up on plane, and the oil embargo happened. And we went from 36 people to 6 people over a weekend. And my dad found himself in a position where he found himself in a place of surrender. Now, I think most of us don't see as a place of surrender as being a place you really want to be in, hosting the white flag, but actually there's freedom in surrender. And Dad took what he had done with the business and he turned it over really into the hands of God. And he said, whatever happened from this day forward is really on account of God, not on account of me. I've done the best I can, and we're likely going to need to liquidate, but I surrender it. And he would joke and say, well, that was easy to do. It wasn't worth anything. But it was so significant in the trajectory of our business, because it really was the headwaters. I would say our business was born again on in September, actually, I believe it was, of 1973, where he communicated to our 2 outside stockholders that we're probably going to have to liquidate. But during the course of that, he surrendered. And so we turned our business over to God then, and not only was it significant for the business, it was significant for our family. And so it was a growth process for us as a business, recognizing that God is sovereign, that he covers it all, and that from that time forward, we started to pick up business, and we've for the most part been on the grow ever since. But recognize that really as the headwaters that have been so important, that have influenced our business for now, I guess you'd say, well, we're 51 years old this year as a business, privately held, family owned. And, but those years, for 48 years or so, 48 years, really, I would say God has been really in the center. And so we're so thankful for that.
That's a fantastic story, Tim. I've not heard that one before, and it's just great for me to hear it too. It's interesting in a period of time of COVID where business is going sideways, maybe down for a lot of folks. I've heard 70,000 businesses have gone out of business. It's a period of time when I would say we're grabbing onto the steering wheel, with some angst and really holding on hard. But interesting that your father came to the place of surrender. And I got to say that I've been there myself. Um, but it for me has been a challenge to stay there as flesh comes back in. So here's my question to you. In transitioning into a state of surrender, what has been for you some of the challenges to overcome to maybe at times move out of a state of surrender? What is the challenges it is for you to live in a state of surrender with a family business?
It is a challenge. For me personally, and I would say as a business, as a family business, uh, we have found that oftentimes it becomes an idol. And it can, and I would say an idol, you could say that an idol is anything that kind of blocks your view of God, kind of thing, or you put between yourself and God. And so we have, as a family, actually had discussion and then prayer and then asked for forgiveness for actually making a business a God in and a man-made God versus having God at the center. And so for us, that position of surrender is a regular thing that we would struggle with, as you've mentioned. And so what we try to do is try to come back to the center. We'll have times of prayer with the family, specifically doing our best to come before Him and say, God, this is about you and not about us. It is for sure a challenge, and even going through COVID here, it has been an enormous challenge to manage through that. Fortunately for the boat business, people have chosen boats to be their recreation of choice. So unexpectedly, the boats have been selling at retail, and we're very thankful for that. But recognize that there are a lot of people out of work, and there's a lot of, besides the sickness, the economy has become sick. And there's, I think, some long-term challenges ahead. So our goal would be to be faithful stewards of the business that God has, we would say, given us, and that is it's a steward as we're managing it for Him. And so at our mission statement starts with God's help, which suggests a dependency, and also with that dependency would come accountability to God for what we do, but with God's help and a steadfast commitment to integrity, doing the right thing the right way, we'll develop an exceptional team of people. We're kind of in the people business, and we build great boats, I would say. Everything begins and ends with people and relationships. And relationships is so important because the only thing that can possibly be eternal is relationships. And so no fiberglass is going to heaven. So relationships are important. So that's whether our team members or our dealers who we work with, or our vendors, or our relationships in the community, how we behave and how we honor God through our relationships is important. And then lastly, to provide exceptional customer satisfaction. So those 5 points in our mission statement, but it really kind of starts, if you will, with surrender from the standpoint with God's help, that we recognize that God is sovereign, that at the end of the day, we're working for Him, and how to honor Him through what we do daily. And but that takes a regular process of surrendering. And sometimes we're good at it, sometimes not, so.
Well, thank you for your transparency, Tim. That's making it very real. So I'm wondering, you are a great example of Generation 2. There were certain things that you probably learned from your father as your father was translating the business and bringing you and your brother and sister into the business. Um, what were some of the lessons you learned from your dad that you thought were pretty profound that is helping you today as you are thinking about the third generation and, uh, you know, just there's folks in our audience that's listening to us that are in family businesses, and like any business, whether you're family or non-family, you have challenges. What were some of the lessons you've learned from your dad that you thought he did a fantastic job on to help you edify the family as well as the business and bring those two things together?
I think my dad operated out of principles, and I think as I look at myself as being a dad, and then also uh, uh, now a senior. My God, I got to say I'm a senior. But as I get older, that principles matter, and that from a standpoint of influencing others, I think operating by principles and the consistency of principles, make a difference. So my dad was a person of integrity, and he would be someone who could be trusted. Everybody would say he could be trusted. And that's an earned position through behaviors. And he lived that, whether it's at home or at work, he lived that. He also was a person that connected relationally. And so, so we put our word relationship in our mission statement, because we never want to lose sight of that people are more important than product. People are more important than a business deal. We never would want to take one of our dealers, maybe they've been with us a long time, and mistreat them because we can get a better deal down the street. Now, that doesn't mean we might not change, our distribution, but we want to consider how we treat that individual. And so that's important to us. And so my dad walked these principles out, and I saw that in so many ways. And sometimes I saw him pass up a really great deal because of a relationship. And so he lived that, and he was someone who could be trusted, and because of that. And so he walked those things out through life.
That's extremely powerful, Tim. Just hearing you say what you said about your dad, I know there's so many guys and so many men that didn't have such a great experience maybe with their fathers, but certainly it gives us inspiration to maybe, even break that cycle. But what I'm hearing you too is I hear the word principle a lot. And, um, I found that if you can articulate, if you first can take the time to write down the principles that you do believe in, and you make them your own, and then you articulate them, it gives you a rudder.
Yes.
What is a boat without a rudder? It gives you a rudder to be able to steer from, right? So what were some of the principles? What are some of the principles that's close and dear to your heart today in the way that you are living your life as well as the business?
Well, first and foremost would really to do my best to honor God in all that I do. That I believe one day I'll stand before Him and be judged for what I did or didn't do. And thankfully, His grace, that unmerited favor, is available to all of us, and you can't earn your way in. But what I do is important, because what I do, it comes from my headwaters personally of where I am with God, my faith, and because everything flows from that. The decisions I make, who I am as a husband, a father, a friend, what I do in business, might be what I do financially. Who am I living for, and am I giving myself away? So to honor Him with my life, ultimately, by giving myself away, and by serving Him, and what I would say would be biblical truth. So I can only do that, to be honest, by the grace of God. I can't measure up otherwise. But if I come from that place of surrender, then He's got something to work with. But otherwise, it's going to just be too much. I'll call it flesh, my own carnality, and I'm just not going to be good enough. But with Him, I can do that. So I would endeavor to serve Him in those regards, taking the gifts, my time, talent, and treasure, and apply it to things that will make a difference. And that I would not want to live a life of just serving myself. Life's too valuable to waste it on yourself. It's just too valuable just to waste it on yourself. And so my hope and my prayer for me is I could continue to grow in that arena and to live that out. And so the great thing is we get to do that at work. We get to do that at home. We get to do that in our community. Our business, there's 6 venues in our business. We get the privilege of, I'll say, honoring God and being a steward. And that is with our team members. We employ about 650 people currently. And we get to by the grace of God, love on these folks. And by doing so, hopefully make a difference. Our dealer network, we ship boats to 45 countries around the world and all over North America. We got relationships with those folks. We've got vendors of which we buy a lot of material from, all kinds of different stuff. And so we got relationships with them. We have our Orlando community that we get to participate in, and we ultimately want to be serving and giving within our Orlando community. And then our boat owners, we actually have a relationship with our boat owners. So I think that might have been 5 or 6. I was counting my fingers and I only got 5, but we've got the opportunity to make a difference. And I think choosing to say, listen, this life is not just about me, but it's about making a difference in the lives of others. And so if we look for that and say, well, what can I do? And it's hard because, the busyness of life is constantly trying to steal, the opportunity to make a difference because we're chasing other things around. But I think doing our best to live deliberately and with intent can make a difference. And so we endeavor to do that. And by the grace of God, we are successful.
Tim, you use the word grace a lot. And I do remember about our great retreat that our fearless leader, Kenan Birch, led at Man of War. You mentioned Man of War as well. So I can see why that was so very much in your backyard and why that was meaningful. And I just remember back to that retreat, sitting at Kenan's feet with a journal and writing like crazy. I call Kenan the Grace Brother. In that he really has a good handle on the word grace, but I hear that a lot from you too. Now, a lot of guys in business, let's just say we are performance orientated, would probably be a good way of saying it. We're going after it. Business at times can be the school of hard knocks, or, we make a profit. It's either a plus or a minus, right? So, and at times business owners can get pretty hard on themselves. How does this concept of grace, how's that helped you in life when, especially in tough times, how's that grace helped you to stay on track to live as principled as you say that you've been living here?
Well, and let me say, the principles I'm talking about are principles I would say we believe in, I believe in. Do we achieve those all the time? No. So I want to make that clear that I'm thankful for God's grace, and grace is defined as an unmerited favor. And so I think we will do better honoring God if we receive the grace that God has for us, and that grace is available. And if we feel like we've got to strive to earn it, then we haven't fully embraced the grace that he has for us. And I think that applies to business too. And, we all fall short, and we all struggle through different aspects, whether it's at home or at work. And, but his grace is available. And, in scripture says that his strength is perfected in weakness. And so that is really his grace at work, because God often works through the more difficult times, and it's through those times I think that the temper of that steel is hardened and shaped, and so but his grace is available to help do that during those even most difficult times.
I love what you're saying. I agree. And it's very evident in your story. If we just go back to your father's experience of surrender and receiving grace, and then what has happened in the last 50 years as a result of that. 650 employees is a lot, and you are making a great impact in Orlando. And speaking of that, I think it was in November, December of last year, you invited us to come to a Thanksgiving dinner. I think it was Thanksgiving, yes. And it was a Thanksgiving celebration with Nathaniel's Hope. And there you were with Marie on the stage and talking about Nathaniel's Hope. And for one, I was completely blown away by how much the ministry has grown over the last 4 or 5 years. I was absolutely astonished to hear that, excited about it. But tell us a little bit more about how Nathaniel's Hope, and tell us a little bit more about, I know this is one of the big ways that you're living out the principles you're talking about and making an impact and difference in families' lives.
In 2001, November 13th, 2001, we had our little boy, our son, die at 3.5 years old unexpectedly. He had numerous challenges, disabilities. He never walked or talked, but in an unexpected fashion, he went, and untimely, he went from earth to heaven, and it rocked our world. And out of that, we had him for 3.5 years. He probably changed my wife and I more than anything else in life, here, and I'm going to be 63 in November. But it was such a privilege to care for our son. And during that process, he taught us more than we can even begin to measure. And at his passing, we recognized this really wasn't the end, it was really the beginning, and that we're stewards of the life that God has given us. We're stewards of the circumstances we've been in. It's not by chance. And that we had the opportunity and the privilege to apply what we learned with our son to life. And so out of his life and death, we started an organization called Nathaniel's Hope, which its mission is really to pull alongside what we call VIPs, which are kids with disabilities, and their families, to lift their arms up, to cheer them on, because it can be an incredibly difficult assignment. And so that came out of the life and death of our son. It wasn't a plan. And I don't know about you or anybody else that might see this podcast. Lots of times, we want a strategy and we want something on a whiteboard, so to speak. But oftentimes God doesn't work that way. And I've told our kids, whenever you think you can begin to predict the future, remember the past. It's probably not going to be like you think. And so I think that, the scripture says, the mind of man plans his ways, but the Lord directs his steps. And so there is a place for planning, but I think it's real important that we allow the directing to take place, and God's in the business of doing that. And so he did that out of the life and death of our son, and changed courses for us. It's like we were headed to LA and we ended up going to Alaska, sort of thing. It was just a whole different journey, but a journey that we feel privileged to have traveled. And so we feel like it's our calling to serve families both locally here and around the nation, and perhaps even around the world sometime, just lifting those families up. Primarily, we work a lot with a local church. Locally here, we do events to support the families, but privileged just to cheer them on, really, in a marathon that they're running called life. And so we're thankful that God gave us that assignment, and that we get to do just a little bit to make a difference there.
It's been so profound just in my exposure of it. And I know that Nathaniel's Hope does a lot, but could you elaborate a little bit more just on two of the sub ministries that you do with Nathaniel's? I'm thinking of Buddy Break. My son was involved there, and my wife, and then Make Him Smile, which was a great event that I was able to volunteer with you on, and I've seen a lot of what you're talking about. But what does Buddy Break do, and why do you do Make Him Smile?
So Buddy Break, when we had our son, we experienced the challenge of having a special needs child and actually just being involved in a church. And so we started a respite program called Buddy Break, where we partner with a local church. We help equip them so that they can care for families that might be part of their fellowship or maybe not, just families in the community. And calling on the parishioners, the people that might attend a church, to engage their gifts in helping really bring the love of Christ, really the love of Christ to these families. And so we partner with the churches, equip them to do that. And usually it's for 3 hours on a Saturday morning, sometimes a Friday night, once a month. It's something that a church can kind of tackle without it being too terribly difficult. And one of the things I love about it is, life is not a spectator sport, nor is serving a spectator sport. The great thing about Buddy Break is it calls people to action, to serve others. Unfortunately, with COVID, it's a very high touch thing. So COVID has made it extremely challenging, but it puts people to work and uses the gifts, because each one of us have gifts that are perhaps in some cases waiting to be used. And so this actually provides an opportunity to really leverage those gifts. And for the church really to do what they're called to do, which is sometimes serving what might be considered the least of these. And that's not in a demeaning fashion. It's just the challenging nature of having a child with disabilities, and it is just off the chart incredible. And we experienced that firsthand for 3.5 years with our son. And then annually, we've held an event for actually 18 years in downtown Orlando called Make 'Em Smile. And that started again with the life and death of our son. And we said we wanted to have a celebration, a festival that really cheers on these families and say, we, the Orlando community, stand with you. And we're cheering you on in life. And we want you to know that we're standing with you. We cannot be in your shoes, but what we can do is we can give you a cup of cold water, and we can say that we're with you. We're walking alongside you. We believe in you. And so our event is intended to do that, and it's very large. It's approximately 40,000 people, and 3,000 what we call VIP families are in attendance, and it's a great event, and it's so great because the Orlando community makes a difference and shows up and really loves on these families. And so we're delighted to be able to do this past year. We did something called Smile Fari because of COVID. We worked with Wild Adventures, and it's a drive-through animal park, and so nobody ever had to get out of their car. And we cheered them on that way, and we had almost 1,500 families come through the Smile Fari. So I think, I think our endeavor is to do things that will love on these families, that they can feel a genuine, authentic love, and then we can bring encouragement and sometimes some other practical things. We do a Christmas event that we provide. We're partnering with Walgreens and Bags and some other companies. We distribute toys, about 15,000 toys to special needs families. Again, this year with COVID, not exactly sure what's going to happen, but we try to do what's possible and allow God to do the impossible. So ultimately, we want to be faithful stewards and do what we can. Sometimes it's less than perfect, but do what we can.
Well, I thought it was very, very innovative to transition into the Smile Fari. Just being there myself, being so touched by the reality of so many families that are going through a difficult time. It is challenging, as you've been saying, and living it, you've experienced it. But if any of you want to just get a little bit wet with a waterfall of grace to encourage folks who are experiencing that pain, I'm telling you, it is fantastic. Next year, I'm bringing my entire team and my entire family just to experience the joy and get a little wet with that grace and encouragement that we're passing on to families. It was an amazing time for me. Well, Tim, I wanted to maybe take the last 5 minutes of our discussion. People say easily at times that sometimes it's easier to make the money than to give it away or make an impact. And in your journey as a philanthropist and trying to make an impact. Some of the things that just stands out to me today a lot is in our conversation is principle centered, filled with God's grace. So it means that, hey, even if I fail, I get back up. I fail forward, as we say here at the Life Wealth Group. And I just keep on going. And there's a lot of intentionality on your side, real pragmatic in the way that you help families. But in your other giving, have you found challenges? Have you found opportunities where you felt like some of those gifts did not necessarily hit the target? How did you overcome that? And how are you, Marie? How have you figured out to become as intentional in your philanthropy as possible?
Well, that is a mouthful, but I'll tell just a short story of a disappointment. But I think it can be applied in a lot of different ways. 30 years ago, we had the privilege of working and starting a small missions organization in 1993 called Teams Commission for Christ, which is still in operation today, where we do short-term mission trips in the country of Guatemala. And I've gone to Guatemala about 35 times and served in missions, and which is, if it changes your life. I give a commercial to say, if you want to change your life, do a foreign missions trip, place where you're going to be uncomfortable. God will show up. I guarantee it. Anyways, and I was born again there, and for sure. But we partnered with this village to build a clinic, and I say we partnered. Actually, truth of the matter is, I think it was largely one guy in the village's idea, and the missionary hooked onto it. We built this clinic on top of a mountain. It was at like 6,000 feet. It was a trek up there. Couldn't pull up a car, and we spent several months, we being a collective group of people, building this clinic. But what we found was it wasn't embraced by the people that lived there. It was like somebody's idea, not a bad idea, but the ownership was with the wrong people. To some degree, it was with us, and the ownership was placed in the wrong, in the wrong place. I think identifying who you're giving to, the vision that they have, are they people of integrity, trustworthy, I think is critical. I spoke on the phone with someone I believe in yesterday that would fall into that category. That's in ministry. And what track record do they have? Because there's going to be disappointments, and that's okay, because you have to give with an open hand. But I think I desire to choose people first when possible, and then maybe mission or cause second. And both of those are a little bit connected at the hip. But if I believe in that person and I know that person, then I have confidence that however how they're going to invest that money is going to be well spent, and there's going to be a good return on that investment. So I think that is critical. Decide what you believe in and what you want to support, and passionately get behind. Ideally, there's a vision and mechanism and systems in place to bear the most fruit. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes you just need to give. And I was on a podcast with Ron Blue the other day. I just joined a podcast, and he was talking about how much he enjoyed generously giving, just cash. And it might be a waitress, it might be someone that cuts your hair, it might be somebody you meet in a grocery line, spontaneously. And I don't do what I'd like to do with that. I need to do more, but I love that.
Yeah.
Because it kind of puts flesh on the giving.
Yeah.
And so I think there's many different mechanisms. I think sometimes you can become so bound up with trying to do it right, you maybe don't give as much or when you should. At least I confess, I for sure have done that. But I know we've got some values at Regal, and one of them is generosity. We want to be generous as a company. I want to be generous as a person. And when I'm no longer here, I would like generosity to be one of the things that would have defined me. I don't think I'm there today, but and unless I die tomorrow, I've got some time. So, I want to be generous, and I don't want to hold what God has graciously given me personally, or a family, or a business so tightly, for fear of the future. Because one reason you don't give maybe is out of fear.
Yeah.
Fear of it's going to not be spent right. Fear of you're not going to have enough, which is a scarcity mentality versus an abundance mentality. I want to live an abundance mentality, and one which would have generosity with an explanation point, kind of thing.
That's awesome, Tim. There's a lot of wonderful principles in there. I hear the word passion, strategic, partnership, ownership, generosity. Uh, there's a wonderful principles. You shared with us a wisdom and a lot of wonderful concepts, principles, life. And thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate that. Um, just quickly, obviously, Regal has a website. What is that website?
Regalboats.com or is our website, and then nathanielshope.org.
nathanielshope.org. Thank you. And I know you guys are cranking out those boats so fast. You gave me a personal tour of the showroom, which looks scarce right now because you're cranking those boats out. And but I have what an experience to go to the showroom, and obviously you have a lot of dealers as well. So I wanted to thank you again for your time, Tim. It's been a blessing to have you part of our podcast, and it's a privilege for me to know you and call you a friend. Have a great rest of the day, and thank you so much for your time with us.
Thank you, Hilgard. Thank you. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Life Wealth Group YouTube channel. We hope you found this video informative. If you have any specific questions as to what you heard today, don't hesitate to reach out to us for a complimentary phone call or meeting in person. Also, don't forget to subscribe.